Christine's long-awaited memoir comes out. We are officially starting off all of the content craziness that fall 2025. My family is still in California, and the majority of my husband's family is in Boston. We fly a lot. Why does packing induce so much anxiety in me?
There comes a moment in every woman's life when silence becomes unbearable. For Christine Brown, that moment hit like a lightning strike. The cameras were rolling, her children were growing, and she had given decades of her life to a marriage that promised sisterhood, stability, and faith. But behind the smiling family portraits and the carefully edited storylines, Christine carried a secret truth. She was drowning. She had believed in the dream of polygamy. She defended it. She raised her children in it. She even cut ties with her own mother to protect it. And then, in one gut-wrenching instant, she knew she could no longer stay. That was the moment she decided to leave, terrified yet determined, fully aware of how forbidden it was to walk away. Because in her world, people don't just leave. But Christine did. And now, after years of living under the shadow of Kody Brown and the expectations of plural marriage, she's putting it all on paper. Christine's memoir, set to release this fall, isn't just another celebrity book. It promises to rip open the glossy surface of sister wives and reveal the darker realities that TLC's cameras only hinted at. The description alone hints at something explosive. A woman who once fought to prove the beauty of polygamy, now exposing the pain, the coercion, and the favoritism that nearly broke her spirit. For longtime viewers, this isn't just about Christine telling her story. It's about truth finally cutting through the performance. What makes this even more powerful is Christine's transformation. Think back to 2010, when Sister Wives first aired. She was the loyal third wife, the one who wanted polygamy more than she wanted the man himself. She defended the lifestyle against critics, even her own Aunt Kristen Decker, who had already escaped the same faith. She believed so deeply in the sisterhood that she ignored her own heartbreak. Fast forward to today, and we see a woman who no longer bends to the rules of her church, her husband, or her culture. Instead, she stands tall, calling out what she once protected. That shift is seismic. And friends, that's exactly what we're going to break down here. Hi, I'm Sarah, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives Daily. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community because we're going to be dissecting Christine's journey piece by piece. And I want to hear from you too. What do you think Christine will reveal in her book that we haven't already seen on screen? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is about all of us who've been watching for years, waiting for the truth to finally come out. Christine Brown walked away from the life she once thought was sacred, and now she's ready to tell us exactly why. When Christine first entered the Brown family in 1994, she wasn't just signing up for a marriage. She was stepping into what she believed was a calling, a way of life that she had grown up hearing about, watching, and even longing for. Christine wasn't the woman who said, "I just want the man." From the very beginning, she wanted the family. She wanted the noise, the bustle, the sisterhood, the shared parenting, and yes, even the challenge of learning to balance jealousy with companionship. In her mind, that was the beauty of polygamy, never having to do life alone. She was young, idealistic, and convinced she had found her place as Kody's third wife. Being the third wife mattered to Christine in ways outsiders might never understand. Within the culture she was raised in, the role carried symbolism. The first wife often bore the weight of establishing the family, setting the tone, carrying the expectations. The second wife brought growth and sometimes tension, but the third wife was different. By the time Christy stepped into the marriage, Kody already had Mary and Janelle. She wasn't expected to prove polygamy worked. She was expected to make it thrive. And in her heart, that felt like destiny. Christine has openly admitted that from the time she was a teenager, she imagined herself in that exact spot, joining an already established plural family as the third wife. To her, that was the dream, and she thought she was walking right into it. And in some ways, the early years gave her exactly what she wanted. The family was still small, still figuring things out, but Christine leaned into her role with passion. She mothered not only her own children, but also helped with Janelle's, building the type of sibling connections that viewers later admired when the show aired. When TLC introduced Sister Wives in 2010, Christine was shown as playful, caring, and deeply invested in the unity of the family. She often joked, she laughed easily, and she framed polygamy as a choice filled with joy and blessings. In those early episodes, she was quick to explain how the system worked and why it mattered. To the outside world, Christine appeared to be one of polygamy's strongest defenders. But beneath that cheerful exterior, cracks were already showing. Even in the first season, we see Christine wrestling with emotions she couldn't fully hide. In the pilot episodes, she admitted her jealousy when Kody courted Robyn. She tried to laugh it off, but the camera caught the sting in her eyes. She confided about her struggles with feeling left out, even though she desperately wanted to portray herself as fully supportive of the principle. Viewers who watched closely could see a woman trying to convince not only the audience, but also herself that this lifestyle was everything she had dreamed of. One of the clearest examples came when the family faced outside criticism. Christine was vocal about defending polygamy, even against people she loved. When her Aunt Kristen Decker, who had left the faith and spoken out against it, joined a televised debate about the dangers of plural marriage, Christine spiraled. In a bathroom meltdown before the debate, she admitted she didn't know how to handle facing her aunt, the woman who represented everything Christine was determined to reject. She broke down, angry and scared, terrified that her family's way of life would be publicly torn apart. In that moment, Christine wasn't just defending Kody or the show. She was defending her own identity, the choice she had made, and the belief system she had built her life on. Her pro-polygamy stance was so strong that she even distanced herself from her own mother, Annie, who had left the lifestyle years before. Christine admitted that she limited her mother's access to her children because of Annie's connection to anti-polygamy groups. At that time, Christine saw her mom as a threat, someone who might undermine the very foundation of her marriage and family. Looking back, the irony is striking. The very same woman Christine once kept at arm's length for rejecting polygamy became the model she would later follow when she made her own decision to leave. But for years, Christine held on tightly to the dream. She told herself that the companionship of sister wives was worth the sacrifice of sharing a husband. She reminded herself that the freedom polygamy offered, a chance to pursue her own interests, while knowing someone else could help with the kids, was valuable. She clung to the vision of unity, even when reality chipped away at it. And that reality hit hardest when Robyn entered the picture. Robyn's arrival in 2010 completely shifted the family dynamic. Christine went from being the playful, beloved third wife to feeling invisible. She admitted to jealousy, frustration, and insecurity. Viewers remember the infamous nacho story where Kody himself admitted he was turned off by Christine eating nachos while they were dating. That moment, thrown casually into conversation years later, revealed just how little he valued her from the start. For Christine, who had built her entire life around the belief that she was meant to be in this family, hearing that her husband never truly wanted her was like a knife to the heart. And the favoritism toward Robyn only deepened that wound. Still, Christine kept playing her part. In interviews, she defended polygamy. In family gatherings, she tried to keep the peace. She smiled through the pain, determined to show the world that plural marriage could be beautiful. But behind the scenes, her body language, her private confessions, and her quiet tears told another story. The dream she had carried since she was 19 was crumbling in front of her, and no amount of public defense could stop it. Christine's early years in the Brown family tell us everything we need to know about her transformation. She wasn't a reluctant participant dragged into polygamy against her will. She was its champion, someone who fought for it, someone who silenced her own doubts in order to prove it could work. That's what makes her eventual decision to walk away so powerful. To understand Christine now, the outspoken truth-teller preparing to publish her memoir, we have to first see her then. The young woman who believed in the dream with every fiber of her being, only to discover the reality was far darker than she ever imagined. When Sister Wives premiered on TLC in 2010, Christine stepped into the spotlight as not just a wife and mother, but a spokesperson for an entire lifestyle. She wasn't just representing herself or even just the Brown family, she was representing plural marriage to millions of viewers who had never seen it up close before. Christine carried that responsibility with a smile, quick humor, and an eagerness to explain why she believed polygamy worked. If Mary was the careful, measured one, and Janelle was the practical one, Christine was the warm, relatable one. She was approachable, she laughed easily, and she framed plur. all marriage as joyful and even enviable. In those early episodes, Christine was often the one who broke the ice. She explained how the kids were raised as siblings rather than rivals, how holidays were lively and full, and how sister wives offered companionship that monogamous women could never understand. She made it sound like polygamy wasn't a sacrifice, but a blessing. Viewers remember her joking about how nice it was to have built-in babysitters in the other wives, or how the wives could lean on each other when Kody was stretched thin. TLC framed Christine as the poster child for why polygamy could work. Happy, bubbly, and completely devoted to the principle. But the very same season that introduced Christine as a defender of plural marriage also introduced cracks in her carefully maintained image.
And the majority of
when the Browns prepared to debate outsiders on national television, including Christine's own aunt Kristen Decker, who had left the faith, Christine fell apart backstage. Cameras caught her pacing, crying, and admitting she didn't know how to face her aunt. She wanted to be strong, to defend her choices, but deep down, she was terrified. That moment became a turning point for viewers. The family wasn't just battling society, it was battling itself, with Christine at the center, torn between her loyalty to her chosen life and the painful doubts creeping in. Christine's role as a spokesperson meant she often overcompensated in public, even while privately unraveling. She would smile and insist polygamy was about love, sacrifice, and unity, only to later admit in confessionals that she was struggling with jealousy and loneliness. The contrast became impossible to ignore. As the seasons rolled on, the cameras revealed a different Christine, not just the fun-loving mom, but a wife who was increasingly sidelined, excluded, and diminished. One of the clearest examples came during Kody's courtship with Robyn. Christine tried to put on a brave face, encouraging the relationship and insisting she supported his choice. But when the family celebrated Robyn joining, Christine couldn't hide the pain. Viewers watched her admit that seeing Kody's affection for another woman, especially the way he doted on Robyn in a way he never had with her, cut deep. In confessionals, she tried to downplay it, but the sadness in her voice told a different story. And then there was the infamous nacho story. Years later, when Kody offhandedly confessed that he was turned off by Christine eating nachos while they were dating, fans were stunned. What sounded like a trivial detail became symbolic of the disdain he carried toward her from the very beginning. For Christine, who had spent nearly 2 decades defending him and the lifestyle, the revelation was crushing. It wasn't just about nachos. It was about realizing that the man she had built her life around never saw her with the love or respect she craved. TLC didn't shy away from showing her reaction, her embarrassment, and the way it validated her long-held fears that she wasn't truly desired. As the show went on, Christine's role shifted from spokesperson to truth-teller. She couldn't hide behind cheerful explanations anymore because the cameras were always there, capturing the subtle glances, the moments of being left out, the hurt when Kody brushed her aside. Viewers saw it when Kody ignored her input during family discussions, when he dismissed her concerns about the kids, and when he chose Robyn's needs over everyone else's. Christine could smile and explain away the lifestyle all she wanted, but the lens told the truth, and fans began to rally behind her. The show itself transformed alongside Christine. What started as a presentation of unity, one big, loving family facing the world together, slowly turned into an exposé of dysfunction. TLC's editing shifted. The early montages of laughter and chaos gave way to confessionals of heartbreak and tears. Christine, who once embodied the dream, became the clearest example of the reality. Her struggles with jealousy, her deep hurt, and her inability to compete with Robyn's favored status were impossible to ignore. One unforgettable scene came when the wives gathered to discuss jealousy openly. Christine admitted she struggled constantly. The camera zoomed in as her face broke, her voice shook, and she confessed that she sometimes hated how much attention Kody gave others. She wasn't proud of it, but she was honest. That honesty made her the most relatable figure on the show. For many fans, Christine stopped being the polygamy spokesperson and started being the wife who feels just like us, insecure, overlooked, and desperate for love. By the time the nacho story surfaced, Christine's transformation was nearly complete. What began as lighthearted reality TV had become a raw exploration of a marriage falling apart, and Christine's pain was at the center. The woman who once proudly distanced herself from her mother for rejecting polygamy was now questioning the very choices she had built her life on. And the cameras never blinked. Every ignored conversation, every forced smile, every tearful confession was preserved for the world to see. Christine's journey on TLC wasn't just about defending polygamy. It was about watching a woman slowly realize that the dream she had clung to since she was a teenager no longer matched her lived reality. The tension between her public role as a defender of plural marriage and her private anguish became the beating heart of Sister Wives. And it set the stage for the next chapter, the unraveling of the Brown family, and Christine's eventual liberation from a system that had demanded her silence for far too long. Christine Brown's journey on Sister Wives, from defender of polygamy to walking away from it, wasn't an isolated story. It was part of a much bigger cycle, one that had been chowing through her family for generations. To truly understand Christine's transformation, you have to look at the women who came before her. Her mother, Annie, and her aunt, Kristen Decker. Both women's lives left deep imprints on Christine's path, even when she tried desperately to ignore them. When TLC first introduced Christine, she proudly described herself as polygamy royalty. Her grandfather was Rulon Allred, the prophet of the Apostolic United Brethren, AUB, one of the largest fundamentalist Mormon sects still practicing plural marriage. Christine's family lineage gave her status in the faith. But what viewers didn't know at first was that inside her family tree were women who had already walked away from that world, women who had seen through polygamy's promises and chosen freedom instead of submission. Her Aunt Kristen Decker was one of the most outspoken. A former plural wife herself, Kristen left polygamy behind and became an activist against it. She didn't just leave quietly, she wrote, spoke, and testified about the harm polygamy caused to women and children. When the Browns were invited to debate outsiders about plural marriage in the show's early seasons, Kristen was one of the panelists. The tension was personal. She wasn't just an activist. She was Christine's blood, a living reminder that there was another path. That moment nearly broke Christine. In the infamous backstage scene before the debate, Christine melted down, sobbing and admitting she couldn't face her aunt. It wasn't just about public speaking nerves. It was about everything Kristen represented. To face Kristen was to face the possibility that the life Christine had chosen was built on sand. And in 2010, Christine wasn't ready to look at that truth. But long before Kristen's activism, there was Annie, Christine's mother. Annie's story haunted Christine more than she wanted to admit. Annie had been pulled into polygamy when she was young. Married early, encouraged to share her husband with other wives, Annie believed it was what God wanted. Ted. But eventually, she came to regret it. She realized she had been coerced into something that broke her spirit. Over time, Annie left polygamy behind completely. When Annie finally walked away, she hoped her children would too. But Christine was stubborn. She believed her mother had made a mistake. Loyal to her church, loyal to Kody, and loyal to the principle of plural marriage, Christine actually cut ties with Annie for a time. It was one of the most heartbreaking revelations Christine later admitted. She distanced herself from her own mother to prove her devotion to polygamy. She wanted to be the good daughter, the faithful believer, the supportive wife, and so she silenced Annie's warnings and chose Kody over her. The parallels between Annie's story and Christine's became painfully clear as the years went on. Annie had married young, under immense cultural and religious pressure. Christine did the same. She was only 19 when she declared that she felt meant to be a third wife. That word, meant, is telling. It wasn't framed as a choice. It was destiny, obligation, divine will. Christine convinced herself that marrying into an already established family, with Kody at its head, was not only her calling, but her purpose. In one episode, Christine openly admitted that she had dreamed of being a third wife since she was a girl. To her, being the third wife meant the kinks of marriage had already been worked out by the first two. She wouldn't have to navigate the early struggles of building a relationship. She could step right into a system that was already running. It sounded, in her youthful mind, easier, smoother, almost glamorous. But underneath that reasoning was something far darker. The same coercive messaging that had been fed to her mother Annie and her Aunt Kristen. The idea that plural marriage was the only path to spiritual salvation and that her worth was tied to being part of it. Christine's belief at 9 wasn't so different from Annie's as a young bride. Both women entered polygamy convinced it was what God demanded. Both women silenced their doubts and told themselves they were meant to sacrifice for the principle. And both women, decades later, came to see how deeply those beliefs had wounded them. What makes Christine's story so striking is how long she resisted following in Annie's footsteps. She had a front-row seat to her mother's regrets. She saw Annie leave, she watched Kristen speak out, and yet she doubled down on polygamy, determined to prove them wrong. She cut off her mother for leaving, defended Kody on national television, and insisted polygamy was the key to happiness. For years, she chose loyalty over truth. But as the seasons of Sister Wives wore on, Annie's and Kristen's choices began to echo louder in Christine's life. Every time Kody dismissed her, every time she felt like a second-class wife, every time she questioned her worth, she was living her mother's story all over again. The cycle was repeating itself. One of the most powerful moments came when Christine reflected on her decision to finally leave Kody. She admitted that for years she had been miserable, but stayed because she thought she had to. She stayed for the kids, for the church, for appearances, but eventually she realized she deserved more. That realization wasn't just her own, it was the culmination of Annie's and Kristen's struggles too. She had walked the very same path they had walked, and at last, she chose to break free. Christine's decision to leave Kody wasn't just about her marriage. It was about her lineage, her family's women who had been silenced and coerced, and the courage to finally stop the cycle. She had once cut ties with her mother to prove her loyalty to polygamy, but years later, she made the very same choice her mother had made, to step away from a life that demanded her silence and sacrifice. In the end, Christine's story isn't just the story of a wife who left her husband. It's the story of a daughter who finally understood her mother. It's the story of a niece who finally stood in her aunt's shoes. And it's the story of how the generational echoes of polygamy, coercion, silence, regret were finally broken, not by rejecting her family, but by finally listening to the lessons they had been trying to teach her all along. For years, Christine Brown held her tongue. She smiled for the cameras, defended her marriage, and tried to embody the ideal of a plural wife. But if you look closely across the seasons of Sister Wives, the cracks were there all along, growing wider with every passing year. By the time the pandemic hit, the foundation had already collapsed. It just hadn't been spoken out loud yet. And Christine, after decades of silence, finally began to show us the raw truth she had been carrying for so long. One of the most painful shifts came during what fans now call the cul-de-sac era. On paper, it should have been Christine's dream. All 4 wives living side by side in Las Vegas, their children running between homes, and Kody moving from house to house like a husband of balance. But the reality was much different. In practice, Christine often found herself sidelined, overlooked in ways that chipped away at her confidence and spirit. While Mary battled her own isolation and Janelle leaned into her independence, Christine seemed stuck in limbo, desperate for Kody's love, yet constantly feeling that she didn't measure up. The favoritism toward Robyn wasn't just a subtle undercurrent, it became a defining wound in Christine's marriage. Fans vividly remember the way Kody doted on Robyn, offering her affection and attention that Christine had been craving for decades. When Robyn joined the family, Christine admitted she struggled with jealousy, but it wasn't the jealousy of one wife against another. It was the grief of realizing her own husband could give so much more to someone else while giving her so little. The smiles and laughter that once defined Christine's screen presence began to dim, replaced with tears in private confessionals.
My family is still in California, and the majority of my husband's family is in Boston.
When Christine revealed in later years how her relationship with Kody started off cold.
I don't know. But
early in their marriage, she tried to be playful, eating nachos in front of him, only to be told he was grossed out by her. That memory stuck with Christine for decades. A quiet humiliation that marked the beginning of a marriage where she would never truly feel desired. It wasn't just about nachos. It was about the pattern of rejection, the way her needs were dismissed while Kody poured his energy into Robyn. By the later seasons, Christine's confessions grew more heartbreaking. She admitted on camera that she no longer felt valued by Kody. She described moments when she would steel herself to ask for affection, only to be rejected. One of the rawest scenes came when she broke down in her bathroom, sobbing that she couldn't do it anymore. For years, Christine had carried the weight of the perfect polygamous wife image, but behind closed doors, she was crumbling. That bathroom meltdown became a symbol of years of swallowed pain finally bubbling to the surface. The pandemic only magnified everything. Kody's rigid rules, his decision to spend nearly all his time with Robyn, and his lack of empathy for Christine's struggles with their children pushed her to her breaking point. Christine had always been the glue, the one trying to keep her kids close to their father. But when Kody dismissed her concerns and treated her like an outsider in her own marriage, she realized the dream she had been defending all these years was built on lies. The family wasn't united. The wives weren't equal. And the man she had sacrificed so much for wasn't willing to fight for her. Fans could feel the shift in Christine's tone. Gone was the woman who smiled through tears, who told herself that this is what she's sig, net up for. Instead, she began to say the quiet part out loud. She admitted her marriage wasn't working. She admitted she wasn't happy. And perhaps most importantly, she admitted she deserved better. These weren't just confessions to a camera. They were a lifeline, a way of speaking the truth after years of silence. Christine's recognition that polygamy had failed her was devastating, but also liberating. She had once told the world that plural marriage was about sisterhood and shared love, but what she had lived was exclusion, favoritism, and heartbreak. Her courage to finally confront that truth, on camera, in front of millions, wasn't just a personal breaking point. It was a cultural one. For years, TLC had sold the image of the Browns as a loving, functioning, plural family. Christine shattered that illusion with her raw honesty. Looking back, the signs had always been there. The polite smiles, the laughter that didn't reach her eyes, the way she cheered for Kody even when he ignored her. Christine carried her pain like a secret, hidden in plain sight. But by the time she admitted her marriage was collapsing, the audience realized that what we had been watching wasn't just a family reality show, it was a slow unraveling of a woman's heart. And when Christine finally chose to stop being silent, the story of Sister Wives changed forever. When Christine Brown finally made the decision to leave Kody in 2021, it wasn't just a family shakeup. It was an earthquake that split the very foundation of what Sister Wives had built for over a decade. For years, viewers had heard Christine whisper her pain in quiet confessionals, but to see her stand face to face with Kody, declare her independence, and walk away from a life she had once sworn was eternal, that was nothing short of revolutionary. Christine had always been raised to believe that marriage, especially plural marriage, was forever. To her, leaving wasn't simply about ending a relationship. It was about stepping outside of everything she had been taught to value. Loyalty to her husband, obedience to her faith, and devotion to the plural lifestyle. The terror of walking away was palpable. She admitted she didn't know what life would look like outside the Brown family, but the truth was clearer than ever. Staying meant continuing to be invisible, ignored, and unloved. And Christine was finally ready to stop disappearing. The cameras captured the raw unraveling. That tense confrontation with Kody, arguably one of the most iconic scenes in the show's history, laid bare decades of hurt. Kody raged about loyalty, about betrayal, about Christine breaking up the family. But Christine's resolve didn't waver. For the first time, she told him and the world that she deserved a partner who valued her, a marriage built on love, not hierarchy or favoritism. Her words weren't just for Kody, they were for every woman watching who had ever been told to settle for less than she deserved. What shocked so many fans wasn't just Christine's courage, it was Kody's response. Instead of fighting for her, instead of showing even a flicker of remorse, he doubled down on control and blame. He accused Christine of being selfish, of dismantling the dream they had built. But in truth, Christine had simply stopped playing along with the lie. She pulled the curtain back on what so many had suspected, but never dared to say, that polygamy, at least in the Brown household, wasn't about equality or shared love. It was about power, control, and women being silenced when their pain threatened the narrative. The aftermath was seismic. The children were shaken. The sister wives were forced to confront their own unhappiness. And the audience watched in awe as Christine, the wife once branded jealous and insecure, transformed into the bravest voice of the family. Her exit wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about rejecting a system that had demanded her silence for too long. Now, with Christine's memoir on the horizon, the story takes an even sharper turn. This isn't just another celebrity book, it's a cultural moment. For the first time, Christine will put her story into her own words. Unfiltered, unedited, and outside the lens of Tuck, the promise of the memoir is clear. To expose the darker side of polygamy, not just the glossy version that the Brown family tried to sell America. Emotional coercion, years of favoritism, financial and spiritual control, and above all, the crushing silencing of women who were told their unhappiness was their own fault. Christine has already given us glimpses of this truth on screen. The tears in her bathroom, the rejection from her husband, the humiliation of being told she wasn't enough. But a memoir has the power to go deeper, to reveal what wasn't filmed, what wasn't said, what was too painful or too raw for reality television. If the show gave us fragments, the memoir promises the full story. And fans are bracing themselves for revelations that could reshape how polygamy is understood in mainstream culture. The anticipation is electric. Christine isn't just writing for herself, she's writing for her mother Annie, who broke free decades earlier. She's writing for her Aunt Kristen, who turned her back on the church and spoke out against it. She's writing for the thousands of women still trapped in systems that mirror her own story, women who are told that obedience is holiness and silence is strength. By speaking out, Christine becomes more than a reality TV star. She becomes a voice in a much larger conversation about gender, faith, and the cost of keeping women quiet. This book has the potential to do what the show never fully allowed, to hold polygamy accountable, not as a lifestyle choice, but as a structure that often leaves women voiceless. For years, Christine played the role expected of her. Now, she's rewriting the script. And make no mistake, this is bigger than the Brown family. Christine's voice represents a turning point. Her story doesn't just end with a divorce. It begins with a liberation. It signals a cultural shift where women who once felt trapped in polygamous marriages are now standing up and saying, "I deserve better." Fans aren't just waiting to hear about Christine's heartbreak. They're waiting to hear how she transformed it into power. Her memoir isn't just her truth. It's a reckoning. It's a warning. And it's a promise to every woman who has ever been sidelined, silenced, or told she wasn't enough. Your story matters, your voice matters, and it's never too late to walk away. Christine Brown's departure was the moment Sister Wives could never recover from. But her memoir, that's the moment polygamy itself might never recover from. And now we circle back to the present, where Christine Brown is no longer the quiet, sidelined wife, living in the shadow of Kody's favoritism. Today, she stands as a woman reborn. She has built a brand new life with David Woolley, a man who cherishes her, celebrates her, and, perhaps most importantly, sees her. For the first time in decades, Christine is truly free. Free to laugh without fear of being dismissed, free to love without competing for scraps of affection, and free to tell her story without asking anyone's permission. Watching Christine blossom in this next chapter has been nothing short of inspiring. The woman who once melted down in her bathroom, overwhelmed with grief and humiliation, is now radiant with joy. The tears that once symbolized despair now carry the weight of triumph. And every time Christine shares a glimpse of her new marriage, her adventures, or her smile, fans are reminded that liberation isn't just possible, it's powerful. But here's the part that has everyone buzzing: Christine's upcoming memoir. We already know the surface, the favoritism, the rejection, the broken promises. But what lies beneath? What pain did she endure off camera that we never saw? What truths were too raw for TLC's edits? And how deep will she go in exposing the emotional coercion and control that kept her silent for so long? The anticipation is electric, and it's not just about gossip or family drama. This memoir has the potential to shake the cultural conversation about polygamy itself, because Christine's story is bigger than Christine. It's about women who were told their lives belonged to someone else. It's about voices that were buried under obedience, loyalty, and fear finally rising to the surface. That's why Christine's journey matters, because when she walked away, she didn't just reclaim her life. She lit a torch for every woman watching who thought she couldn't leave. who thought she had to stay silent, who thought her happiness wasn't worth fighting for. Christine proved them wrong. She proved that it is never too late to demand more, to walk away from control, and to rebuild a life filled with joy. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think Christine will reveal in her memoir? Do you believe it will finally expose the truth about Kody and the reality of life inside the Brown family? Drop your thoughts below. I love hearing your insights and theories. And if you want to keep diving deeper into the stories, the secrets, and the truths behind Sister Wives, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and join this community of people who refuse to look away. Christine's story is more than just reality TV drama. It's a revolution of truth. And as we wait for her words to hit the page, one thing is certain. Once Christine's voice is fully unleashed, there will be no putting the silence back in place.